Hey everybody, so this video is going to be a quick video on the influence of culture on self-construal. So remember, if you look in your book, you will remember, you'll find that a construal is basically the way you interpret a situation. So the way you or really anything. So a self-construal is the way you construe yourself. Well, the book also talks about, Aronson's book also talks about how there are cultural differences in holistic versus analytical thinking. So your Eastern cultures tend to be more holistic in their thinking. They tend to look at the big picture, whereas your Western cultures tend to be more analytical. Well, another difference that we tend to find between your Eastern cultures and your Western cultures are differences in self-construal, the extent to which they construe themselves as being autonomous individuals, or to the extent to which they consider themselves to be an integrated member of their group. And so what we find is that even when you have, so for example, in one study, I forget the author's names on it. Hold on. No. Anyway, so in one study, they had participants, Chinese Canadians, either respond to things, to a survey in Chinese, all right, or respond to it in English. And they looked at the self-statements that these participants, again, they were bicultural, they were Chinese Canadians, all right. Canada is more of a Western culture, so it involves more of an independent self-construal, construing the self as being independent and autonomous, whereas the Chinese culture is more typical of your Eastern cultures in that they have more of an interdependent self-construal. They construe themselves as being an integrated part of the group. All right, independent self-construal, Canada, America, Europe. Interdependent self-construal, the East Asian cultures. So you had these bicultural individuals, these Chinese Canadians. When they responded to questions, so when they made self-statements in Chinese, they actually described themselves more in terms of the group, all right? They had more of a balanced view of themselves, whereas when they wrote these same statements in English, they tended to write in less of a collectivist way and more of in more of an individual way. So highlighting their individual unique features, and there tended to be more of a positive bias in their self-statements than there was when they wrote in Chinese. One of the tendencies we find among those with individual self or independent self-construals is they tend to have more positive self-views than those who have an interdependent self-construal, who tend to have more of a balanced self-construal. And that's all I wanted to talk about for that. So you've got your interdependent self-construal, self-construal that is common of your Eastern cultures, and your independent self-construal, that's common of your Western cultures. Now, the last thing I'll mention is that people in both Eastern and Western cultures vary. All right, so it's not really like all of one. It's a continuum. All right, so you can move from being having an entirely independent self-construal to having an entirely interdependent self-construal, but most people are somewhere in between. And so you can shift, all right? And even within a culture that's, on a whole, mostly independent, on a whole has mostly independent self-controls, or on the whole has mostly interdependent self-controls, within a culture, you can have variance. So within Western cultures, like America, many of us vary in the extent to which we have an independent self-control. Some of us are far more independent than others. Others of us are far more interdependent. And again, and when I say this, I don't mean that we rely more on others. Rather, those of us that have more of an interdependent self-control, we're more likely to view ourselves as being more influenced by others, to be more of the product or more affected by others, even when we don't necessarily want to be. Whereas, you know, your extreme your individuals with extreme independent self-controls, they're probably going to be more likely to assume that any effect that or any influence that others have on them is really only that which they allow them. Okay, so that is it for this quick video on independent and interdependent self-control. Like I've said in other videos. Sorry, man. Puppy decided to be all snorty. So if you have any questions, again, send your emails my way or wait till class. So, but that is it. Take it easy.